Hi, and welcome to the Barn Office. Live from the Barn Office, you got Chad here, and I'm joined online with coach, author, speaker, all around badass, Mr. Steve Kenyon. Steve, how are you today?
I'm just doing great here out on the West Coast. A little wet, a little rainy, a little windy, but the weather held out for the Super Bowl, so now it can get nasty.
Yeah, and I know you're actually traveling this weekend. You're going to be speaking at a glazier clinic in Denver,
That's
and
correct.
I bring that up because I would say I don't even know how many years ago, but I'd say probably close to 10 years ago, or maybe more than that. I saw you do a lecture at the Glazier Clinic in St. Louis,
Okay.
and since then we had kind of just emailed each other back and forth. Was really interested in your message, really interested in your training, and specifically the system. So I asked you to join us today and talk a little bit about, all these years of experience and of your experiences and some of the things that you're interested in.
Okay. Well, great. Yeah, fire away.
One of the things that I've heard you say in other interviews that I really connected with, and I really think a lot of, is that you said, you're very humble in some of the things that you talk about, but you said if you do have a gift, it's that you take the information and all these different training models and different really bright minds that have kind of come up with this stuff, and you put it into a formulated system called the system. So I really like that quote, taking things that others, maybe even smarter people, not in your instance, but taking a little bit from here, taking a little bit from there, and making it your own. Do you feel that that's your case in the past and in now?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm the right age. You can kind of tell that I'm, I'm not a spring chicken. Um, I started this journey in August of 1980. Believe it or not. I mean, I graduated from the University of Nevada and I got a graduate assistantship at Long Beach State. And so in August of 1980, I was running the exercise physiology lab in the morning. And then I'd have a lot of time available in the afternoon before my master's classes at night. Well, I was 2 months. I was 2 blocks away from Wilson High School in Long Beach and just walked over there one day and said, "Hey, I can hear the pads crack and I can smell the grass and hear the whistles blowing. And if you need any help, I could help you out." And that's kind of how it started. But so, I mean, I coached football, I coached wrestling, I coached track and field for the first 5 years of my career. And then for the next 15 years, hold on, I coached football and wrestling, and then dedicated all of the time after that to just coaching football. But during that time at Long Beach State, I learned the research method process by being a student working on my master's degree. So, and I'm just at the right age. I'll be 69 in May. You know, the NSCA had been formed by Boyd Epley et al. Just a couple of years earlier than the time that I got involved in teaching and coaching. So I go, I'm just going to apply these research method principles and, do a lot of library research and, the old days where we had to go to the library and check out manuscripts and microfiche and read articles. And everything was coming out in SCA. So I became a member of the National Strength and Conditioning Association, and I can say without equivocation, 50% of everything that I do is because of my relationship with the NSCA from about 1982 until the early 2000s, quite honestly. And, it was so funny because last week, and I would highly recommend everybody watch it. I saw the Netflix documentary on the miracle, if you guys remember.
Mm-hmm.
Well, guess what? In February of 1980, when Lake Placid Olympics were going on, I was finishing up my degree at the University of Nevada, and the article, I mean, the Netflix documentary talked about the hockey coach for the United States. And I believe that guy was one of the most progressive coaches in the United States at that time. He learned from the Russian coaches, and that's what the NSCA brought. He brought all of their Eastern European training techniques from Vorobiev and Matviev and Viroshansky and all of these geniuses back in the late 50s and the 60s, designing strength and conditioning programs to optimize performance for the Olympics so that, the Eastern Bloc could beat the West in this, international game of tug of war. And those principles are what we still do now. I mean, interesting enough, Coach, I'm back in the game. My system program is a component of speed strength training, which is a company that I'm a consultant for. And I was at Cosumnes River College about 2 months ago, on a sales call, sitting down, shooting the breeze with the athletic director there. One story led to another, and he offered me a job. So now I am the strength coach at a junior college here in Northern California at Cosumnes River College. So, I mean, those drills that we do in the system that I did 35 years ago, 40 years ago, that Vorobiev, Matviev, and Viroshansky were doing in the 60s, I did yesterday with the girls' soccer team at Cosumnes River College. We did dynamic warm-up for about 5 minutes. We did speed work. Yesterday I worked on combine 10s, first step, keeping the back foot low, keeping the head down. And then we went to lateral speed and agility. Then we went to some plyometric work. I did some lateral stick jumps and some tuck jumps with them. We don't do a lot. We don't do a high volume of stuff. Then we transitioned to the weight room. And yesterday, again, I've only been doing it for about 20 days now. We started January the 19th. It was a Monday, it was a holiday. The first day we taught was January the 20th. And yesterday in the weight room, they warmed up with overhead squats on a PVC pipe. Then I introduced front squats, and we added a little load with some training bars. We did some split jerks, and we finished with some clean pulls because I'm kind of leading them up into, doing those yes principles that we've been talking about for 40 years. That yes concept is when you're designing strength and conditioning for an athlete, I don't care how old they are, 8, 80, doesn't matter to me. You have to ask yourself 3 questions. Number 1, are you using a free weight apparatus? Number 2, are you engaging multiple segments? I'm talking about, wrist, elbow, shoulder. I'm talking about ankle, knee, hip, or even more importantly, and even better, I'm talking about ankle, knee, hip, spine, shoulder, elbow, wrist. What is the exercise that I can do that activates all of those joints in the weight room? And, it's kind of like coaching football. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Seattle Seahawks, they ran outside zone on Sunday like big dogs. And, I was running outside zone 30 years ago when it was first introduced because it's a great play. Same thing with our strength concepts. There are a lot of really cool things right now on my Instagram post. Some of these exercises that I'm seeing these trending athletes and coaches and trainers implement, I think are fabulous. The problem is, how do you do it with 20, 25, 30, 35, 40 kids in a weight room that have spectral distributions of abilities and athleticism? So you pare it down, and you do the same thing. It's kind of like an offensive manual in football. There's a million plays, but you run about 10 of them because they work and they've always worked. And that's kind of my philosophy is, if I see something that is really cool, that's really effective, I begin implementing it. I mean, I've started to modify some of my plyometric drills the last couple of years, believe it or not, because thanks to Instagram, the 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 posts that come to my feed now, I say, wow, those pogos where you're really concentrating on a tight ankle, not a lot of flimsy ankle to where I can really minimize amortization phase off the ground. I'm going to start doing those as my base plyometric drill. And I've thrown one exercise out and I've added a new one in because this one is better than that one.
And I think that's a good message because, I've heard there's elegance and simplicity. And that, like you're talking about the Russians, this stuff works. And there's a reason, Olympians, and we're seeing it now on the Olympics now. We're seeing that movement and physics and how the body works with all these different working levers. It's really just science, and it kind of comes back to that. But then also, I think, and I applaud you for being maybe humble or grateful enough to say, I don't know everything, where I can pull from the Russians, but I also see something cool on Instagram that might work too. So you're pulling from a number of different places to, again, formulate your own.
Yes. And, the thing, if I have invented, well, I haven't even invented that yet also, but and I know that you've heard me speak. And I think the thing that's the most significant about what we do, it's not what we do, it's that we do. This is what I'm trying to convince the athletic department at this junior college, which, by the way, I'm an alumni of. I played football at this college 50 years ago. In fact, right now, 1976, in the spring of 76, I was just starting my second year in junior college in football. And then I matriculated to Nevada. But if the girls' soccer coach at Cosumnes River College, who loves what we're doing right now, I train the girls Tuesdays and Thursdays from 1:30 to 3, and then they go out to the field and they practice soccer right after our strength program. And again, I'm taking it easy with them. I'm kind of guiding them in easily. My volumes are down, my loads are down, but the movement patterns are the same. Let me say that again for the crowd that's watching this. My volumes are down, my loads are down, but the movements are still the same. And that, to me, is the essence of how you modify your program. If it's a game day, if it's in season, because, let's go back to my phrase, it's not what you do, it's that you do. If you train for 3 months through the summer, and then once football season starts or fall sports start, and you back off your training, by November, you will be detrained. Let me say that again. If you train hard all summer and then you back off because you've got other more important things to do, special teams, offensive installation, film work, game planning, you will detrain by the time that you are in November. So you need to train through the season. You need to train after the season. You need to train in the off season, and you need to train in the summer. That is the system. The system is a 20-week fall, a 20-week spring, and an 8-week summer program where there are Eastern European periodization, weeks of active rest broken in that are natural to our calendar. Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, Easter, first week of the summer, last week of the summer. Those are your active rest periods. Add them up, that's about 8 weeks. When you subtract out my dates with those 8 weeks, you got a full year. And you've got to continue to train through the year, because that to me is the biggest flaw in strength and conditioning. I hear it all the time. Well, our baseball coach doesn't want the kids to lift weights during baseball season. Well, you know what? That's a problem. There are, I'll guarantee you, the baseball players that are in the professional ranks are training through the season. They have to, because if you don't, you'll detrain. And all of this cool stuff that we do with them in the off season, you lose it because you're not doing it anymore. That to me is, I don't care if you're doing a Herschel Walker workout. You do 100 sit-ups and 100 push-ups and 100 air squats and 100 pull-ups with an assisted band. And that's a great workout if you do it 3 times a week, 50 weeks a year for 4 years. You'd be an animal. Our problem is we stop training because of various things that enter into our program. That's why when I was a strength coach and a football coach, that's why right now I'm teaching classes for the basketball boys and girls at Cosumnes and the soccer girls. We're just starting the program. I'm doing it from 12 to 1:30 for the basketball teams, and I'm doing it from 1:30 to 3 for the soccer girls. The soccer girls are in off season. The basketball kids are in season. So I'm modifying their workouts. I mean, hell, they had a game last night. So I'm going to train them today, and it's going to be kind of an unload day because they played last night. But we're continuing it through the year. And 3 months from now, if the AD goes, well, some of our coaches like your program, some of them are really not that interested in it, so, we're just going to do it in the springtime. And I'm going to very politely say to him, there's really no reason to do that, coach. You're wasting your money paying me, because 3 months a year doesn't help you as an athlete. 12 months a year as an athlete is what helps you. Times 4. Think about those Eastern Europeans. I mean, our high school season is a 4-year Olympic training macro cycle. Think about it, freshman to senior. That's what the Eastern Europeans did. They looked forward 3 cycles, sometimes 12 years in advance. We're getting this athlete who's 8 years old or 10 years old or 12 years old to get ready for an Olympic event when they're 18 or 20 years old, and that was their plan. It's longitudinal. And we have the same opportunity in the United States because of how our school system is set up. The problem is we have leaders in our school systems that don't have the vision that I have. Because if you're on a sports team, you should be strength training year-round in the school day so that it doesn't affect after-school practice, after-school sports. That's another conflict that our poor coaches have. Well, we don't have an in-season weight training club program in the school day. Well, so we got to bring the kids in at 6 in the morning. Or we got to strength train after football practice. And now the kids are getting home 6:30, 7 o'clock at night. I mean, it just makes it so difficult for us. So people kind of just give up on it. So again, if we have athletic directors or if we have administrators that are listening to this podcast, that's my message to them. Figure out a way to create a program that can be inserted into the school day. And then if it's a uniform model of instruction to where you modify load and intensity predicated upon the athletes that are in season, the athletes that are preseason, the athletes that are off season, you can have this spectrum of athletes in the weight room training, because Billy Bob's got a game tonight, but These three athletes are in preseason, and the rest of them are in off season. So you just modify your program, but it's still the same exercises. It's that yes, yes, yes principle we talked about 10 minutes ago.
And I want to see what you think about this, because I think you might, I think I might have heard that you did something similar. But in our program that I was involved in for a number of years, if you came in as a freshman, you worked with no weights whatsoever. You only did the bar. And that was not something that we would negotiate until you could prove that you could officially, manage the movement, the clean movement, and it looked clean, it looked good. Then we could talk about the weights. But you know how teenage boys are with their egos, and they see the senior big dogs lifting all those plates, and I want to do the same thing. And it really wasn't about that. It was about doing the movement right before we start to put before we even talk about load and putting any kind of weights on.
One of the slides in the presentation in my third hour in Denver this weekend is better right and light than wrong and heavy. Again, let's get back in a time machine. I go back to 1980, and when I was doing my master's thesis, it was entitled "The Effect of Power Overload Training on Ergometer Power Output and Wheelchair Racing Performance in Quadriplegics." I was working on an adapted physical education strand, and I was using power overload training principles to train these guys that were quadriplegics, that were wheelchair racers. What I'd found in my research is that, and this is something that is super important, maximum power output occurs at 35% of maximum load. Let me say that again. Maximum power output. I don't care if you're measuring in kilogram meters per second. I don't care if you're measuring in watts. I don't care if you're measuring in horsepower. It doesn't matter. If a girl volleyball player can bench press 100 pounds for one repetition max, her maximum power output is at 35 pounds. Basically, the girl's training bar, because the speed that she can create with that movement creates the highest power output. What's important about that is that it is okay occasionally to lighten the load and move through a full range of motion. What you're doing with freshmen, keeping them on PVC pipes or 10-pound cold rolled steel bars, or a girl's training bar, 15 kilograms, or that now up to a 20 kilo bar, that would be the freshman progression. And if everybody in June can execute a clean pull, a snatch pull, a push press, a front squat, a back squat, an overhead squat, and a jerk with 20 kilos, that is the exit outcome for all freshman athletes at your campus. What you're going to create are monsters by the time they're seniors in high school, which is the objective of the program, not who's winning freshman championships. Think like a Russian. Think like Viroshansky, And I mean, if you've ever seen videos of that guy, he looked like a computer programmer from Microsoft, but he had this body weight plyometric protocol that everybody participated in, and he supplemented it with Olympic lifting and jumping on and off of boxes. Really unique back in the 50s and the 60s. I'm doing it right now. I'm going to do it. I've got a class in 2 hours. I'll be there in 2 hours. And today we're going to do King of the Hill with a basketball team as an unload, because we've got these really cool plyo boxes that are 3 inches. And then there's a 6-inch, there's a 12-inch, there's an 18-inch, there's a 24-inch. So I can stack them up to about 54 inches. We're going to start with a 3 inch. They're going to jump up on the box. And then we add and we add and we add and we add, and we're going to find out who the king of the hill is. And I mean, it's a blast, but it's a great unload activity. And it teaches the movement pattern, coach, that all of us do when we clean or we snatch. We're flat footed, we cock our pistols, we have a little hip hinge, we extend at the ankle, the knee, the hip joint, we get vertical, and we land on a box. It put a bar in our hand and we're doing a clean or we're doing a snatch or we're doing a clean pull or we're doing a snatch pull. And if you throw in some tuck jumps and a couple of those CrossFit drills like ball slams and wall balls and kettlebell swings, I'm telling you, you got a sports program for every athlete on campus. I mean, I was sitting in a meeting with all of these coaches from this junior college, and I said, the way you get better at playing volleyball is by playing volleyball. What I'm going to do, I kind of make them a little better athlete. There is not a volleyball specific program. There's not a soccer specific program. There's not a baseball or softball specific program. There's a program. And then I get them in, I train them, I get them out, and then they go out onto their field and they practice their respective sports. I mean, I would be the hypocrite of hypocrites if after this, I think is my 19th year speaking at Glazer this year. I would be the hypocrite of hypocrites if you came to Casunas River College and you saw me doing something different with basketball players than with volleyball players or with soccer players. Now, soccer, I mean, but think about it. It's speed, lateral speed, plyometrics, and yes, weightlifting. That's what I do. And where the science and the art comes in is the modification of load based upon when the season is or isn't. Once everyone is trained in the system, once everybody can do all 100 exercises with fidelity, now we start manipulating loads and volumes. And once those loads and volumes are manipulated, now we start lifting some heavy weight. But it may be, but it most likely will not be in season, because in season is more for speed of movement and movement through a full range of motion. But we have to add in the caveat for the power lifter people and the strength people in our group. There's nothing wrong with it. The only way that you can fire every motor neuron is by using heavy loads. So pulls, clean pull, snatch pull. Bench press, simple move. Back squat, front squat, overhead squat. Simple to complex moves, but still not super complex like a clean or a snatch. So, man, you can, when the kids really get good at their movements, you can start plating on weight like a big dog because they've figured out how to make the move. Doesn't happen in a week. Not going to happen in a month. It might not even happen for these junior college athletes in the 2 years that I have them. But I'll tell you what, right now, I've got 5 or 6 girls on their soccer team. They would be phenomenal weightlifters because they understand the model, and they're already demonstrating some very advanced techniques in snatch pull, overhead squat, front squat, split jerk, push press, everything we've done up to this point. Good stuff.
Talking about load management, I know at least at one point you were a pretty big believer in, if we're talking football specifically, keeping practices short and pretty intense, actually getting your conditioning while at practice, not before, not after, and not part of a punishment. When you hear somebody like Kurt Signetti come out and say that his practices are an hour and a half and they just won the national championship and turned the program around in historic fashion, do you still feel that way as far as practices and the skill work and the skill development with sport specifics?
Absolutely, Coach. I mean, our practices. Kurt must have Kurt must have heard what we were talking about back in 1995. We had 100-minute practice. I mean, and Monday was a light practice. Monday was shirts and t-shirts. And we would go through a special team script, and everything to me is scripted. I'm as anal retentive as they get, coach. I've got practice plans back, to the Carter administration. And we had a 30-play offensive script. We had a 20-play defensive script. And we had a 100-minute practice. I had some off-campus coaches that were drifting in from, the junior high school, and a couple of people that actually worked for a living that were helping me coach. So I was the special teams coordinator. I would do a dynamic warm-up, and then we would go through a special teams protocol. Then by about, that was at 3:15. By about a quarter to 4, we had some coaches that were there, and we had defensive emphasis, offensive team on one day, Tuesday, offensive emphasis, defensive team on Wednesday. And those were our 2 work days. And then Thursdays was a light scripted practice where we simulated a game. It was really cool. I used to simulate these games. We'd go through all of this, everything that you would go through in a football game. Onside kick, defense against onside kick. There's a safety. How do you got to kick the ball after a safety? All of those, Hail Mary, all of those scenarios that we see every Sunday and Saturday. But absolutely, 100-minute practice. And that 30-play script was, and I learned this from a guy by the name of Fred Jones. Those of you that are listening on the podcast, the positive classroom instruction and positive classroom discipline were his 2 books. And I heard him speak in 1988. And it was an epiphany for me. And, we want to circle back to those people that had a lot of influence over me. And it was all between about 1984 to about 1990, when I was kind of I was in my learning phase of coaching. But, my mid-20s to about my 30th birthday. But what I did, I'm driving back home. In fact, I can remember the day. It was it was the day of the Loma Prieta earthquake. When the San Francisco Giants and the Oakland A's were having a baseball series game, and it was canceled because of the earthquake. It was a Tuesday. We were on the practice field in Northern California at Casa Roble High School, and I remember the earthquake. I could feel it.
Wow.
Yeah, crazy. But that day was that clinic, and it was my principal released me for the day. I wasn't at school. I didn't really want to go. It kind of pissed me off, but I was so glad I went, because he taught me this thing. It was called it was like a positive carrot that you dangle in front of your athletes. So I'm driving back to school. I'm going, how can I implement this thing today? So I had these 2 stud linemen, Davison and Fisher. Remember, Davidson was a guard and Fisher was a tackle. And they were like the leaders of the team. They were the enforcers. And I said, hey, dudes, this is what we're going to do today. We're going to run our 30-play script. Because on every Tuesday, I would run 6 repeat 200-meter sprints to finish practice at this time of my career. We had the thin butts, the medium butts, and the fat butts. And they would just run from water fountain to water fountain on the grass, around behind the goalpost, between the track and the field. Those were our repeats. And the kids hated them because we did them every Tuesday after practice. Okay? So I said, all right, how can I use this Fred Jones stuff? All right, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get Fisher and Davidson. I'm going to say, all right, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you 20 minutes to do this 30-play script. In 30 plays, you got to finish it under 20 minutes. Every minute that you finish the script, under 20 minutes, I will deduct one of the 200-meter sprints. And they like looked at me like, oh, coach, we're all over this. So, I mean, it started spreading like wildfire during practice. Hey, coach is going to do something today that's really cool. So, man, I'm over there standing. I didn't crack a whip. I didn't say a word, coach. I just stood there because they're running the script. Kids are flying off the field, on the field. The scout team is running full speed, everybody. And I just got a stopwatch in my hand. And on the 30th play, I go, click. I looked at it, and they're all looking at me. There's like 45 guys. They're all looking at me. And this is early in the season. This is late September, early October, World Series time. They're looking at me, and I go, that was 18 minutes. So we've only got 4 200-meter sprints today. And they all kind of celebrated. We ran 4 200s. I waved the last 2 sprints. And every Tuesday, coach, for the rest of the season, they never finished that 30-play script in more than 15 minutes. And every single player was soaked. Heart rate probably at the max. I mean, it was amazing. That team went 9-1. And we made it to the playoffs for that school for the first time in, 20 years. And that was kind of my deal was I would go to a school, I would turn an outhouse into a penthouse, and then I'd move on to another school. Very Signetti-like, coach. Very Signetti-like. I did it at Wilson High School in Long Beach. I did it at Encina High School in Sacramento. They had lost 30 games in a row when I took the job. First year we went 3-6-1. Second year, we went 6-4. Then I went to that school in Orangeville, Casa Roble, the time of the Loma Prieta earthquake. Did the same thing at Del Campo High School. And when I think about it, the things that we did that were significant, number one, it was a year-round strength and conditioning program, period. End of statement, end of argument. This is 1985, coach. This is in 1985 when we were doing basically the same stuff I'm still doing. Okay, almost. Was that 40? Is that 45 years? Or was that 40 years? 40 years ago.
That's 40 years.
Yep. 40 years. And that's the number one. The number two is high intensity, short football practices that were all it was tempo. It was all about tempo. I mean, we were doing what Oregon did in the 2000s. We were doing it at Casa Roble High School in 1986, 1987. It was because of this thing that I learned from this sports psychologist about rewarding athletes for doing the right thing instead of punishing athletes when they do something wrong. That's that positive instruction. I dangled a carrot for them. I got a desired outcome, and they got a benefit from that desired outcome. And I ran that 30-play script concept, coach, for 25 years. 25 years. Here's another great one. Let me give it to some of your football coaches. You have kids that are late to practice. Happens all the time, all over the country. Okay, for whatever reason. I'm at Del Campo High School, and our practice field is in the front of the parking lot. The school is here, the parking lot's here, and then this is our practice field. Every practice at Del Campo High School from 1994 until I left there in 2016, every practice started with 50 down-ups. This is really important. Some of your young coaches, they need to be writing this shit down. I'm telling you. Every practice starts with 50 down-ups. And and I know how much of a pain in the ass a down up is,
Mm-hmm.
especially in Northern California in August when it's 115 degrees. But every practice started with 50 down ups. 5-minute block on my practice plan. 5-minute block. If you are on time at practice, I would waive your down ups. You guys with me on that? Think about this. This is not applying punishment. This is eliminating an undesired behavior. If you are on time, I waive your down ups. You don't have down ups. We might move right to period 2 in the practice plan, which was dynamic warm up. Okay? You know how many kids I had late at Del Campo High School in 20 plus years? I could count them on my hand because of that little deal. It's just the simplest little thing. It's just the same thing we did at the end of practice with the what Fred Jones called the PAT. It was a positive activity time, a PAT. Okay, good stuff. I mean, just simple. It's how you change culture in sport. Pete Carroll had a lot of stuff that was a great influence on me. The CrossFit modalities, which I think are fabulous. Some of the stuff I'm not too keen on because they're not too technical. I'm a real technician in the weight room. But counting how much, how many, how fast, how far, every day in the weight room, you've got to do that. You've got to compete in January, February, March, April, May, June, and July in the weight room. And you got to make some of those, what Coach Kenyon calls the E2s, those really diabolical metabolics. You got to do them so that the football game is easy compared to what we do in the weight room. This is physiological. A football game is less taxing physiologically than some of the workouts that we do in the weight room. And, you don't just do one or two of them. You do them embedded into the system, this training cycle throughout the year.
Well, you mentioned E2 and your energy systems, and we're going to get you out of here. I know you got some stuff that you got to do, but real quickly, the E1s, E2s, and E3s, and your system breaks them up. And E1, I would say, is your pretty traditional training, would you say? Your sets of 5 and maybe sets of 10 or something. Your
Correct.
E2 is kind of what you just mentioned, is like your metabolic conditioning that leaves you flat on your back crying for your mama type of thing.
Correct.
And then your E3 is more interval type work, right?
You hit the nail on the head. And again, my background is in research science, and again, E1 is full recovery. It's what we do a lot in the weight room, but if that's what you do only in the weight room, you're going to lose a football game at the end of the second quarter, and you're going to lose in the fourth quarter, and you're going to have injuries. Okay? I need to talk to the San Francisco 49ers, I guess. But E2s are the lactic acid tolerance training. There's no rest. It would be like, okay, coach, you're going to do 15 snatches with 40 kilos. Then you're going to go immediately to 15 pull-ups with an assisted band off the rack. Then you're going to hold the plank. And there's going to be 3 boys in a training group. One guy's snatching, one guy's doing pull-ups, one guy's holding a plank. And they go click, 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 5 rounds for time. And I'm going to tell you something. If you took a blood lactate level after the 5th round, it would be, through the roof. And that's exactly what you want to create in the weight room, is that it's like running repeat 400s on a track that creates that lactic acid that forces you to be a tough guy. I mean, that's a Vince Lombardi phrase. Fatigue makes cowards of everybody. And we've got to eliminate cowardice by pushing them into that lactic acid tolerance training. That E3 is you have a fartlek. You have an exercise, and then you have a what's called work relief. E1s are rest relief, classic old day lifting. Three guys in a group. One guy's benching, one and two guys are spotting at each ends of the bar. And you rotate, rotate, rotate. But you lift for 10 seconds and you rest for about 30 seconds as you're rotating. That is classic E1 training. Great stuff. Only do it about once a week. If you're doing it 3 times a week, somebody's doing E2s and E3s. When you play them, they're gonna kick your ass. The E3s are the work relief. Exercise and do some kind of cardiovascular event. I don't care if it's run outside the weight room, around the gym, and back inside the weight room. That's perfect. Jumping jacks, Harvard step test. If you got Schwinn aerodynes and you're really sophisticated, if you got concept 2 rowers and you're really sophisticated, there's a lot of ways to skin that cardiovascular cat. But yeah, that you metabolize is still a high intensity program. But that cardiovascular event metabolizes a lot of the lactic acid in what they call the Cori cycle in your liver. So, yeah, I mean, what I'm probably giving to some of your listeners is a lot of information. And I mean, I don't consider myself Albert Einstein. But I do have a modicum of intelligence. But what I have is 40 plus years of information. And I mean, each one of these little pieces is something that I've learned. If you've heard me say, in 1982, I did this. In 1986, I did that. In 1988, I listened to this. In 1995, we did that. And I mean, it's time. It's time. It's humility. And it's the desire to be the best. And if there's something out there that is being done better than what I'm doing it, I'm going to implement it starting tomorrow. And you can't get that overnight. You can't get it in a year. You can't get it in 5 years. You get it in 40. So again, I'm very excited that I'm back in the weight room, because I've been selling weight rooms, and with this tariff stuff and Chinese imports and delays. I got 4 projects right now that are delayed, and my poor clients want to hang me. And I think I'm getting out of it, because I've done it long enough, and I've gotten back into the weight room. I'm going to try to make this last weight room a perfect weight room that's like my weight room. And I'm going to stay there, and I'm going to train these junior college athletes, and I'm going to turn that place into my SST laboratory. And you're going to see new videos. You're going to see new exercises. You're going to see new techniques and new drills. And it's all going to come out of this little junior college in Northern California. And, I'm 68. I'll be 69 in a couple of months. And, I'd like to do this until I'm 75. And, I play golf every afternoon. I'm looking out my window here to the second fairway at Rancho Murrieta Country Club. And, I'm going to strength train. I want to stay with people like you that are excited about what's going on. And I want to get back in the weight room and train athletes and do some of these really cool new exercises that I'm seeing on Instagram. And I'm going to want to share it with all of our people so that our athletes can be optimized for athletic performance, which is a mission statement for my speed strength training business. But even more importantly, especially now what I'm seeing is there are way too many injuries in our sport. And I think there's a lot of it has to do with how we're training people and how long we're practicing. I can't do anything about the NFL and their 250 football game season drives me apeshit. But they don't really care, because it's meat in the hoof, baby. But we can control it in high school. We can do it with obviously a 10-game season, which is obvious. And then, if you're lucky enough to make the playoffs, the most you're going to have is about 14 games. So by doing it in the weight room every day, year round, and having high intensity, short practices, we're going to continue to optimize athletic performance and hopefully minimize injury potential in the next generation of athletes.
Last one for you, Coach. We'll let you get out of here. You mentioned CrossFit, and I want to say that at some point you had mentioned that you and Greg Glassman, you guys' paths kind of crossed, maybe in the early days when they were in Santa Cruz. And I know obviously he didn't invent high intensity, he didn't invent metabolic conditioning, but CrossFit definitely popularized it. And what can you tell us about, maybe the early days of you guys' paths crossing and what you think?
Well, again, I'm cool, Coach. I don't have to leave for my class until about 10:45. So if we got 10, 15 more minutes,
yeah,
I'm cool.
Absolutely.
A couple of epiphanies in my life. The Fred Jones thing was huge, but that was how I applied positive classroom instruction and discipline onto the practice field to optimize performance for football. Two things that were huge for me. In 1988, I was invited to the Olympic Training Center. So I'm going to kind of segue here, but I'm going to get to CrossFit next. In 1988, I was invited to the first ever Level 1 Olympic weightlifting certification. Okay, that was at Colorado Springs at the Olympic Training Center. And our coaches were Harvey Newton, John Garhammer, Mike Stone, Bob Takano, and Dragomir Siroslan, which at the time was the national strength weightlifting coach for the United States. So I got introduced to Olympic weightlifting not because I'm an Olympic weightlifter, but because again I wanted to learn from the best. And that was a weekend of epiphany for me. And that's why I still just so firmly believe that the Olympic weightlifting movements are the key for optimizing athletic performance. I saw Wesley Barnett, 100-kilo weightlifter, 225-pound dude. He looked like one of those defensive ends for the Houston Texans. He was that kind of a physique, just a Greek god. I saw him doing a set of 10 box jumps on a 54-inch box. Doing, 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 doing. And I go, again, the scientist in me goes, is it the chicken or the egg? Is he an athlete because he's a weightlifter, or is he a weightlifter because he's an athlete? I believe that he is an athlete because he lifted weights. Weightlifting, not powerlifting, not slow movements, fast, explosive, dynamic, moving, full body exercises. Okay, that's that one piece. But a couple of years later, Mike Bergner, who's one of the best strength coaches in the world, period. He was an NSCA Coach of the Year a couple of times before I was, and just a legend in the strength and conditioning world. He's kind of got the corner on the Olympic weightlifting market for CrossFit. I think it's fabulous because he's the best. He called me up one day and he said, "Hey, Steve, there's this thing going on, man. It's called CrossFit. And there's this dude that's got this little gym over in Santa Cruz, and he's offering this certification. And I got you into it if you want to go." And I'm 2 hours away from Santa Cruz. I just got to drive west, and I'm there. So I was at the very first ever CrossFit certification taught by Greg in this little garage gym that he had. There were me and 24 other people. And that was another one of those epiphanies. And You think about yes, yes, yes exercises. Free weight, multi-segment standing position. I mean, the CrossFit basics are the murderer's row of yes, yes, yes exercises. Ball slams, wall balls, RKBS, Russian kettlebell swings, AKBS, American kettlebell swings, and thrusters. There's a bunch more, but those to me, that's like Gehrig, Mantle, Mays, DiMaggio. Those are the exercises, and those are so integral to our program. It's just ridiculous. If I walk into a weight room and there are no killer bees, that's the word that I did coin. Bars, bumpers, balls, bells, boxes, and bands. Throw in a couple of more racks, paint some ladders and lines and pattern striping on the floor, and you got an SST weight room. But you got to get them. If you're not ball slamming, if you're not wall balling, if you're not kettlebell swinging, there's sumo deadlift, high pull. That's another one. They're just that's how you get the kids into the room. That's how you get them trained. And that's how you get them out. And then you go practice. Baseball, football, basketball, wrestling, track, soccer, tennis, golf, hell, I don't care. TPI, Titleist Performance Institute. I'm a level 3 TPI guy. I went down to Greg Rose's place in Oceanside, got clinicked up. Guess what they're doing? The same stuff. You ever watch Scotty Scheffler warm up? You see what he's doing? He's doing trap bar pulls. And then he does trap bar pulls to box jumps because they're all creating amazing ground forces. Hell, I hit the ball farther now as a 69-year-old than I did when I was 40 because of ground forces. And that could take us into another hour that you don't have time for. But no, yeah, CrossFit is the thing I don't like about CrossFit. What I don't like is when you say 40 kilo snatch, 100 reps, and every person in the class has to do 40 kilo snatch with 100 reps. And you got a 40-year-old housewife that kills herself next to a guy who's a monster. He can pick his teeth with 40 kilos. But so to me, it's load is adjusted, predicated on the quality of your technique. And I compliment you and your freshman program. You have modified load until they have perfect technique. That is the flaw in the weight room, is when we start plating on too much weight too soon. And that's what I don't like about CrossFit. The other thing I don't like about CrossFit is some of the techniques that I've seen at a CrossFit competition are horrible because the objective is to do it as fast as possible. I want them to do it with excellence as fast as possible, which is going to slow down the event. But that's another story. So the workout protocols are amazing. And I think they have to be incorporated into a sports performance training program. E1s, E2s, and E3s are all CrossFit protocols. I just refined them into energy system training to where if I'm doing E1s on Monday, I'm doing E2s on Wednesday, and I'm going to do an E3 on Friday because I want a spectral application of energy systems throughout the entire training cycle year round.
Well, I think I remember one of your slides in your presentation, you had somebody that had just done something similar to CrossFit, and they were lying down flat on their back. And you were like, that's what a football game feels like. So why aren't we doing that type of training? And it just, to me, it was one of those moments. It's like, yeah, that's what a football game feels like. And it also feels like intervals where I get 10 seconds of work and then 30 seconds, 20 seconds of rest, right?
Exactly. And again, if you embrace the principles of E1, E2, E3, you get all three. You get the ATP CP maximum explosivity stuff with 30 seconds of rest relief. Then you get the no rest, where your lactic acid goes through the roof. Then you get interval training, where you're really developing cardiovascular fitness. And cardiovascular fitness is developed at the 1 minute and the 2 minute period. You don't have to do, and I don't do any long distance training with most of my athletes, because all of our sports that we train, with the exception of long distance swimming, cross country, and track that's greater than 1,500 meters, nobody needs to do, 3 mile runs. That in fact, what you do there at the cellular level, you change fiber type. Where if you're a ballistic, explosive athlete, which is golf, tennis, baseball, soccer, football, volleyball, basketball, just go down the list. All of those sports need to have explosivity and power and speed. And when you train for distance, you convert power and speed muscle fibers into distance muscle fibers. So you are in effect reducing their performance level. So I haven't prescribed anything farther than 800 meters or a 2 minute cardiovascular event in over 20 years because of that reason.
And would you say too, like you're talking earlier with Oregon, and tempo it's been the sexy thing for the past 15 years or so, but would you say the ability to recover is just as important as the work output? Because like if you are playing tempo on a team and you're able to recover quicker than they are or better than they are, then you have the advantage. And even if you aren't as skilled or as matched up, you're not you don't have the athletes maybe that they do, what you can do is outwork them, and part of that is recovery.
Absolutely, coach. And I mean, again, if you embrace the principles of E1, E2, E3, if you're doing E1 training, E2 training, and E3 training year round, you're going to start at a game. I mean, if there's this is the y-axis and this is the x-axis on a graph, and if we're measuring, proximity to maximum movement, whatever that value is, however we want to do it. If you can maintain that level for 48 minutes in a high school football game or 60 minutes in a junior college or a college football game, and your opponent is going to start where you start, but then they start to taper because of fitness, I mean, that's what it's all about. And if I'm doing heavy deadlifts, heavy bench press, and heavy back squat, and posting records up on the wall and passing out t-shirts, that's great. 1 day a week. Let me say that again for our football coaching population across the country. 1 day a week is really good. There's got to be something else you do 2 days a week. And it should be your team is laid flat out on the ground on Wednesdays. And if they're laid out flat on the ground on Wednesdays, on Friday, you do something like Wednesday, but you give a recovery period by having them run around the gym for 2 minutes and then come back into the weight room and do it again. That's E1, that's E2, that's E3. Doesn't always have to be Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It can be. That's what CrossFit also taught me. You almost want randomness in your exercise distribution because you want to constantly, physiologically, and psychologically shock your athletes constantly through the season because that creates that adaptation. That's the biggest difference I'm seeing right now in the last year on Instagram is you are getting so much of this nonlinear neurological training. It's just awesome where you see these guys out there on the field and they jump over a cone and then they jump over a hurdle and then they turn sideways and then they backpedal and then they sprint and then they jump over another hurdle. And as long as it's not more than 10 seconds in length, I love it. I think it's awesome. It's just a pain in the ass to set that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I just don't want to do that. So I know that I can do it. I can do lateral stick jumps in a gym floor. In fact, I'm going to do them here in about an hour. And I know that they're going to create the same benefit because I can train a group of people and have them do the same thing and watch them while they're doing it. And then I can, and to kind of close, because I know you probably got other things to do too. I could talk about this shit all day, Coach.
Oh, me too.
But
can I say real quick?
Yeah.
That E1 team that you're talking about, where they just stick to E1s.
Yep.
That's who I want to see in the fourth quarter. That's who I want to be up against in the fourth quarter.
Coach, you want to schedule them?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even want to go. I can give you a visual story of Whitney High School in the late 90s? No, it was early 2000s. It was about 2005. Whitney High School, the coaches at Whitney High School used to train with us at my SST training facility in the morning. We would do this stuff 4 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. We were, before E1, E2, E3 was invented, we were doing these exercises. And we put in their weight room, and they had their kids doing the same thing. I saw Sacramento High School get off the bus. And when I saw these boys that got off the bus, I said, oh my God, these little farm boys from Whitney High School are going to have their asses handed to them by these monsters. It couldn't have been any different. Mm-hmm. I mean, at the end of the second quarter, it started to happen. And what I saw in the fourth quarter, I wish there was videotape of it. I mean, there would be a play launched and they would drag a Sac-High Dragon off the field. Another play, they'd drag another one off the field. I mean, by the end of the game, they had lost almost their whole starting unit on defense because Whitney was here the whole time. And Sac-High they just fell off a cliff.
Yeah.
And I'll bet you when I go to their weight room, they're doing E1s on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and they have some strong boys. They had some monsters, but 400-pound bench press doesn't help you in the 46th minute of a football game. Yeah. If you're not capable of controlling the lactic acid in your cells. And I mean, it's just a math equation. So get me back on what we were, before we got off on that tangent.
You said you had something to wrap up.
Yes. Thank you, Coach. One of the most important things that I learned from Fred Jones was instruction and feedback. And one of the things that I've done, what I think is the best thing that I do, is number one, I set up a weight room to where you can instruct, where I can move like a cat, like a caged panther, and I give feedback to athletes almost every rep. It's what I saw Dragomir do in 1988 with the Olympic weightlifting team. 8 platforms around the ring of the room. 1 lifter per platform. 1 guy lifting and Dragomir watching him. Then the next guy, then the next guy, then the next guy, then the next guy. And every single athlete got feedback every single rep. It changed me. And I'm flying back from Colorado going, how can I do that with 48 kids in my weight room? How can I do it? Well, the way you do it is you reorganize your weight room to where and most weight rooms look like that nowadays. If you looked at weight rooms 25 years ago, they look totally different than they look now. They look like SST weight rooms. There's racks on the perimeters of the rooms. There are these long open areas down the middle where you can do dynamic warm-up, speed, plyometric stuff, group core. But even more importantly, is it allows you to give feedback to each athlete in a positive way. And the phrase that I learned from Fred Jones was, tell them what to do, what they're doing right, and then tell them what to do next. It is the most important thing of what we just talked about for an hour. Tell them what to do, and then tell them what they did right, and then tell them what to do next. Perfect example. I had a girl yesterday doing an overhead squat with a PVC pipe. I have a 14-inch, wall ball, med ball on the ground, dictating squat depth. So these wonderful soccer athlete, female college girls are good athletes. They're able to sit down on that ball easy, which is, what high school boys can't do because of flexibility issues. But these girls are getting rock bottom with their squats. They got that figured out. But they're having issues holding the bar locked out over the head or with the width of the grip. So inferior instruction would be this: error recognition. A girl would do an overhead squat and you go, no, you're doing it wrong. Your hands aren't wide enough. You need to get your hands wide. I've heard that kind of stuff in sport coaching for 40 plus years. We don't need that. You don't need to say that. You don't need to say no. It's not even one no, coach. It's freaking 3 no's. All right? They don't need to know what they're doing wrong. They need to know what they did right. And they need to know what to do next, which requires knowledge and instructional feedback. So this is what I would say to the girl. I said, your squat depth was fabulous. Next rep, widen the grip on the bar. That is awesome stuff. And it isn't because I'm God's gift to instruction. It's because I'm humble enough to recognize that somebody else was smarter than me and gave me a tool for my instructional toolbox. So that girl got feedback immediately. My squat depth is excellent. I just need to widen the grip on the bar. You can do the same thing in the football field. Think about it. You've done it. You probably felt this. You jump off sides in a football game or practice, and the team, has to do down-ups, or the guys they run to the fence or something like that. You get punished for screwing up. We need to stop that. Guy jumps off sides. Here's what you say. The guy looks at you in morbid fear, knowing that you're going to bring wrath down on this poor 14-year-old. And you go, your first step was excellent. Next time, listen to the snap count. It's a totally different way of teaching. And I have been doing it for 40 years. And it's taken me that long to refine it because we are evolutionarily hardwired to recognize error. If we didn't, we wouldn't have gotten out of the jungle 2.5 million years ago. It's just, we have to fight that negative stuff. Your feet are too wide. Your back is rounded. I mean, I've heard it forever. What did they do right? What do they need to do next? And then you build on it, like YMCA swim instruction, progressive part. That's why the SST instructional protocol has 10 steps for the Olympic lifts. Mike Bergner and I designed that over a pitcher of beer in 1992. And I've sold over 1,000 sets of those posters. I'm out of them now. And in fact, I need to make new ones because I need to put some posters up at Cosumnes River College, and take me back. But sometimes I'll go to a gym, I'll go visit a guy. In fact, I was at River City High School in West Sacramento a couple of months ago. The guys need some equipment, and I saw my posters up on the wall. And I mean, they've been up on the wall for probably 15 years because I sold out of them. God, probably in about 2015 is when I sold out of those posters. But they're just fabulous. It's a way to teach the Olympic lifts. And one of these days, I want to do it at a Glazer clinic. I want all the coaches to walk into the room and there's no chairs in the room. There's 50 PVC pipes. And I say, all right, dudes, grab your pipes. Let's get big. And
You've seen some of those guys, right?
Coach, I'm telling you, man, the funniest thing in the world is to watch a high school football player try to do an overhead squat.
Yeah.
Because they've been curling and they've been benching,
Yep.
They just adaptively shorten the front side, and man, they cannot get into this position to save their life. But once you get them in that position and you do it with fidelity, you double their athleticism. I'm telling you, the overhead squat is, I mean, hell, think about it. In the Gray Cook functional movement screen, the FMS protocol, it's the number one thing. They get them into an overhead squat, and they rate them on a point scale, because the potential for getting injured is exponentially high if you cannot do an overhead squat. So let's overhead squat, everybody who's listening. Go to Home Depot. I did. Casinos River College has got 25 of them. I went to Home Depot, bought 10-foot PVC pipes. I cut them in half with my Milwaukee saw, and those girls are lifting on PVC pipe, and the boys today in basketball, they'll be lifting on the PVC pipe, because today we got to do clean pull, front squat, and cleans. It's going to be awesome.
Coach, I've enjoyed this so much. Steve Kenyon, SSTweightrooms.com. You can get all the information there and the manual as well. Do you still have the manual for sale?
I sure do, Coach. In fact, I just picked up the manuscripts on Friday. I'm going to bring a bunch with me to Denver. Wheels Up Friday. I'm going to enjoy Friday night in Denver, speak Saturday afternoon, 1 o'clock, basically 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock. And then I'm going to take my wife out to a Valentine's dinner somewhere in Denver. And I'll be back Sunday night because we got class next week. Monday's a holiday, but Tuesday is, I'll be back at it in the weight room doing it.
Steve Kenyon, SSTweightrooms.com. You can find all the information there. I really enjoyed this. Thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you, Coach, and good luck with you and yours as well. Thank you guys for suffering through me, but I'm 2 cups of coffee in, and I'm going to get another one before I head to the weight room.